Welcome to the CBS Sports College Football Channel. I'm Andrew Ivins, joined by my guys, Tom Loy and Blair Angulo. Today, we're breaking down Michigan's 2026 recruiting class in advance of National Signing Day. Wolverines looking to sign back-to-back top 10 ranked recruiting classes. Blair, I'll start with you. Give me a ready-to-play prospect in this group.
Well, Drew, I want to pat you on the back here because I think the scouting department knocked it out of the park with Julian Walker. I love his closing speed. When you dive into the tape, when you really kind of see what he's able to do from a technique standpoint, he's a menace. He's a pest in the backfield, stacks up tackles for loss time and time again. I think his chase, his high pursuit ability, just the ability to get into the backfield and put pressure on the quarterback is something that's going to allow him to get on the field early on there in Ann Arbor, get this guy on campus, get him in the weight room. I think he's going to be a special pass rusher there in the Big Ten.
Still committed to Michigan, but we'll see at the time of this airs whether or not South Carolina flips it. But I'm going to go with five-star running back Savion Hyder. This kid is special. Again, hat tip to you, Andrew Ivins, and our scouting team, the number one running back in the country. This kid is an absolute nightmare for defenders. At some point, I genuinely think he is going to be considered the number one running back in all of college football. He is a home run threat every time he touches the football. Massive, massive, massive win here for the Michigan Wolverines.
Yeah, Tom, I'll echo that as well on Savion Hyder. I don't know if I've scouted a high school running back that I feel as convicted on as Savion Hyder. He's got the burst, he's got the vision, he's got the power. And you think about Michigan, we'll see what happens with Justice Haynes if he returns, but Jordan Marshall's already there. We could look up in 2026 and Michigan could have the top backfield in all of college football. It could be a true three-headed monster. Michigan, guys, two quarterbacks committed right now after landing the nation's number one player last cycle in Bryce Underwood. Tom, how did they get Tommy Carr, CJ Carr's younger brother?
Yeah, let me just look at the backstory a little bit. Blair, you guys can talk about the player, but huge victory here for Michigan. Obviously, this is a kid, great eval by Miami of Ohio early to land Tommy Carr, to pair him with Brady Smigel. But with Tommy in particular, it's pretty wild. This kid visited Notre Dame a couple times this fall. There was a point, I believe it was the USC game, where he was going to come up as a true prospect for Notre Dame. They were going to offer him and potentially take his commitment. But in the end, he decided he didn't want to follow CJ Carr. He's done that long enough as Saline. He didn't want to do it in the college level as well. So he decided to be a Michigan Wolverine. Really, really big pickup. This is a kid that can make all the throws. I mean, I was his biggest, harshest critic just 2 years ago. He was a baseball player turned football player, trying to make it work, plays basketball as well. But in the end, I really believe he has developed into one of the nation's premier high school quarterbacks, and I am fired up about his future in Ann Arbor.
I think Brady Smigel gives them a nice security blanket because he's very steady. He does everything well, maybe not amazing in any one trait, but I think he's really good across the board. One of the brightest quarterbacks in this class that I was able to stumble upon. And his road to Ann Arbor was also filled with twists and turns because he was previously committed to Florida State. He backs off that commitment, makes the switch over to Michigan. It looked like the Wolverines were leading for him early on in the recruiting cycle. And I believe he was actually on a flight to Michigan to take a visit when the Wolverines landed Brady Hart, who you remember was able to reclassify from 2026 to 2025. He's now at Texas A&M. So Michigan still ends up with Brady Smigel at the end of the day. Like I said, I think he's going to be a good depth piece for this quarterback room. I'm not sure he's going in there expecting to play from day one. Obviously, you've got the Bryce Underwood presence there in that quarterback room, but I think he's in it for a long haul. He's excited to be a Wolverine. And when you think about pro-style quarterbacks are able to operate an offense, you look that up and you see a picture of Brady Smigel.
Well, I mean, both Tommy Carr, Brady, they both have size. They both have traits to mold for the long haul. And, hey, let's not forget, Michigan's also got Peter Bork committed in the class of 2027. It wasn't too long ago that quarterback room was kind of a black hole for the Wolverines after J.J. McCarthy. You look up now, they could have 4 or 5 blue-chip signal callers there in Ann Arbor and a lot of depth and potential competition behind Bryce Underwood. So credit the staff there in Ann Arbor for getting that quarterback position right. Guys, what about an underrated player in the class? Give me an unsung hero, Blair.
I got to go with Mason Bonner. He's about 6'4", 6'5", a big tight end out of the state of Colorado. That's a flyover state. You know, as much as we hate to say it, it pretty much is in this recruiting juncture. But they've been developing tight ends at a really impressive clip in recent cycles. Terrence Ferguson's having a nice rookie season with the Rams out of Colorado, went to Oregon. You see Gunnar Helm getting drafted last year out of Texas. I think Mason Bonner has a chance to be the next one there in the Centennial State. I know they have Matt Ludwig as well in this class, a 4-star tight end from the state of Montana. But Bonner, with his hoops background, with his ability to play wide out, he's been a big wide receiver. I think he's going to be able to put on some weight, put on some muscle, get bigger and physically ready for the Big Ten. And when you mix his athleticism and that dual sport, the dual sport part of his resume that I know the scouting team loves, I really like the upside in Mason Bonner.
Look, I hate to be a little repetitive here, but I'm actually going to stay with Tommy Carr. I just talked about him, but it really just, I want people to understand how excited I am about him and his future in Ann Arbor with the Wolverines. I mean, I watched him go from a guy that I said to him, I'm like, you have a long way to go if you're going to be a high-level college football player, to a guy that I think is truly one of the top quarterbacks in the country. And I think he's trending in the right direction. I believe that when Bryce Underwood's time at Michigan is done, Tommy Carr is going to be the next man up whenever, in the next 2 years. So I am very excited about him. I think he's a big time prospect. He's a winner. He's going to have to just continue filling out physically. But again, I really just want to stamp it. I think this is a massive, massive win for Michigan.
Hey, no bigger fan at 24/7 Sports, aside from you, Tom, but then Hudson Standish of Tommy Carr. We were going to move him into the top 247 when he was committed to the Miami of Ohio. My underrated player, unsung hero, whatever we want to call it, Alistair Vallejo, defensive lineman inside the top 247. I think this guy is Mason Graham all over again. Gabe Brooks there in the Lone Star State for us. He has been pounding the table for Alistair. And, he's a guy that doesn't stuff the stat sheet, but when you turn on the tape, he's constantly wedging his way into gaps, making plays, setting the table for some of his teammates. So I think for Michigan to go down into Texas and get him a guy that's a finalist for the National Hispanic Player of the Year award, really, really nice pickup. And I think that defensive line group is the strength of the class for the Wolverines. They got some difference makers there. Finally, guys, hey, a big picture takeaway when we look at this recruiting class. I said again, looking for a back-to-back top 10 finish. Tom, I'll start with you.
I would just say that I'm a little surprised the top 5 players in the state left home and they're not going to be at Michigan. I really felt like as a whole, they could have done a better job of recruiting the guys that are in state. I think letting a guy like Lincoln Keys, one of the top tight ends, leave home for Georgia. It's Tommy Carr's best friend. I feel like if they'd have played it a little differently, those guys would both have ended up at Michigan. Losing a couple offensive linemen to Notre Dame is tough. I think the biggest miss of all is, and from what I've gathered, kind of slow played CJ Sadler for a while, letting him leave for UNC. I know there was some talk that they turned up the heat a little bit late, but I think that's a miss because I love CJ Sadler. But like all in all, absolutely love the top half of this class. We talked about Savion Hyder. We talked about Julian Walker. Carter Meadows is a freak. Like, again, all of these guys at the top, it's a tremendous class heading to Ann Arbor. Really, really good job as a whole in this class.
Tom, I love that you brought up in-state recruiting. I'm a huge geography buff. As you guys know, I love looking at maps. I love looking at pipeline states. And when you think about the Wolverines, they have never signed 4 players from the state of Texas in the same class. They've never signed 4 players out of the state of Virginia in the same class. And look at the recruiting class. They're doing that in this cycle for both states. They have 4 in Texas, 4 in Virginia. I'm not saying Mike Elko, watch your back. I'm not saying James Franklin, hey, the Wolverines are going to stamp and plant their flag there in your state now. But what I am saying is that they're able to adjust and they're able to be variable in the sense of going out to states, going out to regions that are going to be talent rich, and they will go wherever they need to fill certain position needs in any given recruiting class. I think that's a bright spot that gives you a lot of optimism if you're a Michigan fan, especially in this new era of college football where there is no real borders, right? There are no real, set time zones in terms of where guys are going to want to stay regionally. I think the Wolverines are primed to do big things, not only there in the Midwest, but obviously nationally as well.
Hey, Virginia, man, churning out more and more NFL players. Guys, for me, what stands out about this group is the two towering pass rushers they have committed. Tom, you brought up Carter Meadows. Blair, you brought up Julian Walker. Look, Michigan in recent years is one of the best at taking the guys we grade as 3-stars and turning them into future pros and guys that are going day 1 and day 2 of the NFL draft. Usually, they don't meet the height, weight, speed requisites. They're guys that have a chip on their shoulder. Now Michigan goes out and they get these spider-like pass rushers. I'm excited to see what a player development program like Michigan is going to be able to get out of Carter Meadows, is going to be able to get out of a Julian Walker, because Michigan really hasn't had these type of body types since maybe Rashawn Gary when he signed back in 2016. So I think that's what jumps out about Michigan's class. It's the defensive line, and more notably, the two guys on the corner that can pin their ears back and wreak havoc in the Big Ten. That'll do it for Michigan. Like we said, knocking on the door of a top 10 finish. Bryce Underwood, some help on the way.